Hello. So I don't make a lot of videos, but thought it'd be fun to talk about my experience in this video. First of all, everyone say hi to Raleigh. Hi, Raleigh. He is my buddy. Anyways, it's a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with the carnivore diet. Because it's something I'm really passionate about, something that I've taken a lot of time to research and understand, contrary to many people's belief that it's a new fad diet. This is completely untrue in my opinion. And so I just want to talk about my experience with it, a little bit of what I've learned, which is hard to go into because there's so much information that I've learned about this. And how I'm feeling from doing this. I'm coming up on 60 days, so to be honest, it takes a while for the body to transition to a it's a ketosis type state. Predominantly in this diet, your body has to run on fat as its main fuel source because it's a zero carb diet. And I believe this diet is the actual original diet for humans to have evolved to live on. I think back when we were, even before we were humans, we wanted to find the most nutrient-dense food because food was more scarce, of course, than it is now. And by eating animal foods, people were able to obtain the most nutrient-dense food, and so they did this, and I think people lived off of a full nose-to-tail diet, mostly of ruminant animals, which are deer, sheep, cows. Cows are huge. Beef is actually, from what I've learned, the most nutrient-dense food on the entire planet. My idea of what a superfood has completely changed since starting this diet, which is really funny. I used to believe a lot of the same things that the modern nutritionists and fad, different superfoods like kale, spinach, almonds, avocados, blueberries, and stuff like that was like the best thing you could eat. In fact, my diet was not full vegetarian, but it was pretty close. I was still eating eggs and like chicken and just a very low fat diet before I started this. And the reason I got into this was, for one, as many people know, I was experimenting with fasting and learning about fasting for about a month before this, and that really opened my eyes to a lot of things like autophagy, and it kind of changed the way I think. I started to think about the body and how our body functions and how we don't need to eat as much as we do in Western culture, and not as often as we do either. Eating 3 meals a day can actually, 3 to 6 meals a day is what a lot of people tell us that we need to eat, and that causes a lot of different issues in the body, insulin spikes. So I started learning about different hormones like insulin, how that works, how different hormones like ghrelin and how the body starts to work when utilizing different food sources and the detriment that carbs can cause in the body. So after I learned about how overeating and insulin can cause inflammation in the body and all these other, which inflammation is basically the cause of almost every disease that occurs in the body. So the goal is to lower inflammation. That's kind of in a nutshell what I've learned. And carbs cause the most out of all 3 macro food groups, carbs, protein, and fat. Carbs cause the highest spike. So I started looking into a zero carb diet. This just naturally occurred after doing research on the internet. What does zero carb diet mean? That means a predominantly that means exactly that, an animal-based diet, because there's very low carbs in animal foods. There's a little bit in eggs, a little bit in some of the organ meats and stuff like that. But so the carnivore diet is probably the best diet for a low inflammatory diet. And you know, I looked into the keto diet a little bit, and there's still like a decent amount of carbs that, I mean, not a ton, actually pretty low amount in the keto diet, but there's still a lot of plant foods in the keto diet that people can consume. And basically, so my experience so far has been cutting out all plants from my diet. I don't eat any plants. And my body got fat adapted, and it started that in the fasting state, because it had to use my own body fat to fuel itself when I'm not consuming anything. And then I started, when I started eating animal foods, it had to learn to use the fat from the animal foods as its source of energy. And your body can run on fats or carbs as energy. I believe, as we all started out in a ketosis state as infants, you know, we used our mother's breast milk, hopefully, as our energy source. That led to a ketosis state in our body, you know, because that's fat and protein, basically. I don't know, there might be some carbs in that, I'm not sure, but I know there's carbs in cow's milk. So if that's our natural state, then it only makes sense that our bodies can run fully functional off of fat. And I've proven that to myself, thousands of testimonies. Like, my body functions and my brain functions a lot better off of a high fat diet, and zero carbs, and then a good amount of protein as well. And I love the way I feel. I don't have energy crashes anymore. I used to be basically hypoglycemic, which is like a precursor to diabetes, basically. When your body becomes this insulin resistant, and it starts to do that after a while, that leads to diabetes. And I think like the majority of our country is, I know I've heard 1 in 4 people take some sort of diabetic drug like metformin or something, which is just absolutely insane. That shows you, you know, so diabetes is a huge disease in this country. It's very common. Heart disease is still one of the top killers, if not the top killer in the entire country, in Western civilization. Obesity, of course, like, it's just become normal to be overweight and accepted, and there's a lot of controversy around this, but it's not healthy. It's just not. Like, there's so many studies about it being unhealthy to be overweight. And cancer is also super common for people to get. You know, I believe that's caused by a lot of sugar consumption, because it's all inflammatory diseases. These are all inflammatory diseases that, also mental illness. Like, that's something I've really learned, is that our mental state is so connected to our physical state, of course. And so many people suffer from depression and anxiety in this country, which I think a huge part of, not all of it, but a huge part of, is directly connected to the body and our diet. I don't know where my dog just went, but anyways, so learning all of this stuff has really created a passion inside of me to want to spread this information to other people. In my own personal experience, I've had relief in a few different physical areas, not just the energy balances and feeling good running off ketones and my body being fat adapted and all that stuff. I love that. It feels great. It feels I can think clearer and actually see better, and I just don't have this hypoglycemic state anymore. Also, some inflammatory stuff that's gone down in my own body is I used to have really, really bad hip problems that would flare up, and I'm not sure, I haven't pinpointed which food caused this pain in my hip. The doctor didn't really know what it was when I saw him. They thought it might be bursitis. I'm really young to have that. But that's completely gone. Like, I don't have any inflammatory stuff in my hip anymore. Also, my skin has cleared up a ton. It's hard to see in the sunlight, but like, compared to what it was, my skin is like super clear. I also had kind of some arthritis. The doctor told me in my neck that doesn't act up anymore. I have a lot more flexibility and motion, range of motion in my neck. I just feel better overall. And like, I didn't have crazy health issues, but I had some. And I think that my mood is a lot more stable and consistent from implementing the diet as well. And I'm only like 60 days into this. So there's some other things that happen when you start to detox from sugar. And one thing that I want to touch on real quick, one thing I want to touch on about plants, actually, let me just open this up a little bit, is the anti-nutrients found in plants. So I was taught my whole life, eat your vegetables. They're really good for you. They have lots of vitamins, and we need those as a staple in our diet. I didn't know that plants, and it totally makes sense. So, okay, there's plants and animals in the environment, in the natural everywhere, right? Plants can't run away. They're stuck to the ground. They don't have legs. Animals, as their defense to not be eaten, have claws and teeth and speed and size or whatever. Those are their defenses not to be eaten, because everyone wants to survive. Everything wants to survive. Plants don't have that. They're stuck in the ground. So what do they have? They have chemical weapons. They have different chemicals in them that get their predators, herbivores and omnivores, not to eat them. These are basically what are known as anti-nutrients. Some of these are stuff like phytates, lectins, oxalates. So I want to touch on oxalates a little bit, because oxalates are pretty crazy. These crystalline structures basically in plants that accumulate in our body over time, get stored in our body all over. And when you start to detox from a high oxalate diet, which I was eating a very high oxalate diet, a lot of spinach, a lot of almonds, stuff that I thought was superfoods and really healthy. So after I cut that out of my diet, my body starts depleting them out of my system. And when you detox from oxalates, they come out in cycles, and they can come out in all sorts of weird, strange ways, and it takes a long time because they just live in your body. I had no idea. So there's stuff like that creates a detox sort of thing to happen. But it's also a funny topic, detox, because a lot of people believe, I need to drink green juices and all this sorts of stuff to detox my body, which is exactly the opposite. You know, if all these plants have all these toxins in them, you're not doing yourself any favors by using them as a detox method. We have a liver for a reason. That's what detoxes our body. Fruit and vegetable juices are probably one of the worst things you can consume anyways, because it causes like a huge sugar rush and insulin spike in the body, which then creates more inflammation. So there's so much information about this that it's hard to touch on all of it right now. I would love to keep spreading the information that I learned, to keep helping people. I'm really not a fan of veganism. I think that veganism is equally, if not possibly worse. I think it's an equal comparison of the standard American diet, of how detrimental it can be to your health. I've talked to tons of recovering vegans who have had terrible health after a few years, because our brains cannot live without animal foods. Not our brains, but our brains or bodies cannot live without animal foods. Plant-based eaters have to supplement with a bunch of nutrients and vitamins, different omega-3s, different vitamin B, vitamin K, different stuff that you cannot find. And you can find every single vitamin that you need in an animal-based diet. If you eat nose to tail, if you eat organ meats, I do. I eat kidney, liver. I don't love organ meats. They don't taste great, but you just fry them up in some butter, and I didn't grow up with them, so it's kind of a taste that you have to develop a little bit. And I eat a lot of beef, which that's a whole other thing. People believe that beef is, a lot of vegans and a lot of people in general, there's a lot of false information right now going around, a lot of propaganda saying that beef and cows are a big cause for climate change and global warming and all that stuff. And I just advise anyone to do a little research before they believe the hype. Take your time to look into what are the real contributors, because beef itself accounts for an incredibly low amount of global warming. Incredibly low. In fact, plants actually cause more emissions than beef production does. That's a huge thing I've learned. I just believe there's a lot more to this big hype and growth, this big wave of plant-based diet being popular out there. There's more to it than just, they say it's healthy, but is it really healthy? Or are people saying that because they can make money off of it? I just hope that everyone can look into this a little bit more before they just believe the mainstream, because the mainstream, in my opinion, is all fueled by money, and money is not always honest. The system of money is flawed, and I don't know, there's so much more. I'm super excited about just starting this diet, and I want to keep seeing where it goes. I know a lot of people that have done it for multiple years and up to 50 years. I know a guy that did it for 50 years. I don't know him personally, but his name was Bear Stanley. This old hippie that's just been eating meat his whole life and still around, and he thinks that that's where a lot of his health has come from. I ask, if anyone has any questions or wants to talk, I have tons of counter arguments to a lot of the mainstream info that's out there, and I don't want to argue. I'm just here to spread information and help people, because I care about people's health, because I care about my own health, and I think that it's a really big, I feel passionate about it and purpose towards this whole thing. And so yeah, anyone have questions? I feel like I've rambled a lot, and I don't know if I've made any clear points, but that's okay. First video, signing off. Have a great day.